Like everyone's phone on mute?
Oh, that would be great.
Sure.
Yeah, so if everybody could just mute themselves.
Oh, I see Tony's calling in. Tony, are we going to see your face?
I think she's not dialed in yet.
Oh, you think that was her?
Oh, maybe so. Okay. So while everybody's finishing dialing in and getting set, I decided to start with the PLA baseline criteria rather than continuing with the retention, because we got some feedback with retention, and I'm still trying to incorporate it into the document so that it's easier for us to take a look at. So if we have time today, we'll continue with retention, but we'll start with our baseline criteria for PLA today. And hopefully you either have the agenda open or you can see the criteria that we've established up on the left-hand side of the screen there. And so what we'll do is we'll do just like we've done for the others. We'll go through each bullet point and look and decide whether or not we all agree that it's baseline criteria that we want to include. So the first one we have is PLA credit. And that seems like a pretty good criteria that we want to include. Is there any discussion on that? Anybody have any comments or thoughts?
And when we say PLA credit in this context, when we actually go through our cases on this, then are we thinking that that conversation means how much, the quantity of credit? Is that the discussion that would generate?
I can talk a little to that. Is when we're talking about PLA credit, we outlined in the outcomes spreadsheet the different methods that we're talking about for getting credit for people, from CLEP and Dante's test to challenge exams or other methods. So these are all the different types of credit that we're talking about. So this is what we're speaking of when we speak of credit and tracking.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty, there's more examples in the outcomes, but I'll just touch on it there.
That's great. And so then the idea that we're looking at this in terms of continuous improvement, right? What would we be looking for? Just the idea that it's being assigned under some of the methods that Andy just mentioned?
Yeah.
What would be the unit of measure here?
Thank you.
Okay. For one, then we get into the different areas down below, of course. But
Mm-hmm.
you know, in many colleges and probably in different programs, people don't track this at all. So beginning to track it is one thing.
Okay.
If we're going from no idea of what the numbers are to some idea what the numbers are, that's an improvement. So, so tracking who gets it, particularly for the people in. Can I just use these other things to talk about this? So as we go down the list here, we're talking about the number of HEW students who apply for PLA credits during this time frame. So that would be all the people who, you know, it's self-explanatory, but these are all the different people who apply for your program, who apply for PLA. And so we can track different aspects of this: how many receive credit, how many veterans receive credit, and so on. This is a way that we can begin tracking PLA at your school as far as the HEW grant is concerned. And that's what we're looking to start. I mean, this is at many campuses, this is poorly done, period. You know, it's very hard to pull this data together. So having a complete and concrete set of this data would be valuable.
So Andy, I think other than number 1 and number 2, I think it's pretty clear what people are collecting. But for the first two, I mean, when we say PLA credit, do we want PMs to track every quarter the number of credits awarded, a number of PLA credits awarded for all grant-funded students?
That's a good question. I think so, but I think that's something I want to discuss with Margaret and others after this, to say exactly what we're talking about when we, is it an accumulation of all the different types of credit, just one number, or are we talking about something else? So I think that would be just one number. How many actual credits were achieved through PLA. But let me talk with Margaret and Patricia about this.
And others on the call may have a sense of that too, based on their own experience. Any discussion, Esther? I'm sorry.
No, that's great.
I thought maybe we want to call for discussion on this.
Yeah, that's great. I'd love to hear what you guys want to, you know, when we're talking about PLA credit, what it means to you guys. Because this is sort of an open book in many different areas and different, you know, systems and what is called PLA.
I think this is Lynette. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I think I understand, like Margaret said, all of the bullet points on what we're tracking and what a PLA credit means. I guess I just don't understand the difference between the first two things. So for gathering baseline criteria, what is the difference between PLA credit and then definition of PLA for tracking?
Okay. For the definition for PLA for tracking, that's something we've talked about a little bit as well. And for what I'm looking at is something that shortens the path to someone's degree. So it could be very broadly determined. You know, if this is if something, a challenge test or a PLA test allowed that person to shorten that path, that can be PLA. So that's along the definition lines.
So it really shouldn't.
So for continuous improvement, it would just be listing the types of PLA we currently accept.
I think definition of PLA for tracking really shouldn't be one of the baseline criteria. I think it's really a side note to the criteria.
Okay.
But Lynette, to your point, I think that's a great way to think about it.
So if we're thinking continuous improvement and starting out from, say, day one, we accept AP credit exam and we accept challenge exams, and then by the time the grant's over, we now accept AP, CLEP, IB, Dante's, blah, 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 then that shows we improved. So
that would be an interesting measure to add.
Yeah. In drilling down even further, which CLEP and which Dante's test. So that's an excellent point. Like at my school, we accept CLEP, but I'm going to ask them to look at accepting different ones, you know, than we currently do.
So we're talking about maybe adding some categories, some specific categories of PLA credit?
Yeah, so PLA, types of PLA credit accepted at each institution maybe would be the...
Yeah, and I'd say in which programs, currently of our 30-something programs, I think only 8 accept some type of experiential PLA, but we're trying to get more, so that could be, you know, a type in which programs or how many things you can do if we're talking about evaluating and improving.
Well, what I would say is that one of our focuses is first to focus on what we're doing on the HEW grant, you know, so what we're doing that affects what we do here as opposed to what the campus is doing. So as long as the focus is on the grant first, and then outside of that is fine as well, that's where it should be. Does that make sense, Lynette?
Yeah, and what I'm talking about is directly related to the grant. Like, for instance, our computer networking program doesn't accept PLA, and we'd like them to, especially with our new HIT certificate. So that's kind of a thing. And CLEP and Dante's are really big with veterans, so we're trying to, from our angle, get that further, kind of using me to kind of push things along that have been kind of on the sideline.
That's perfect.
Okay.
Exactly the spirit of the grant, too.
Yep.
All right, so we are talking about adding the types of PLA credit accepted by both the college program. Is that right? And then adding categories.
Yeah. Like, if they don't accept CLEP, do they accept CLEP later, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good idea, Lynette.
And we're taking off the definition of PLA for tracking. All right, so as far as PLA credit goes, the types of PLA credit accepted by the college program with the categories, any more discussion on that? Rachel, how about you?
No comment.
Okay. Tony?
No, I'm just still trying to wrap my brain around what we're trying to get at here. Are people going to develop? I thought part of the grant was that we had to develop challenge exams for the courses that we are teaching.
Uh-huh. And,
okay.
And challenge exams are just one form of PLA.
Right.
Credit.
So are you saying that if somebody wants to put together a portfolio or take one of the other exams that we can take that in as long as, say, NOVA already accepts that?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure, and the goal of this is to identify items that we want to measure to demonstrate improvement over time in the grant.
Okay.
Okay. Rob, how about you? I see you're muted. Do you have anything to add to the discussion at this point?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, hi, Rob.
No, sorry. I like this a lot. I also like it because it will, as a veteran, I like the idea that it's a positive way to show that a lot of our veterans may already have some of these skills, and of course they can apply those through a challenge exam or through CLEPS. And it's a good measurement because the DOL could look at that later and may also make some changes for the military. So that's all I have for now.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good point. All right, so let's just do a show of hands. Everybody remembers how to do their hands. If you raise your hand, let's see, if we agree that we want to amend this to include types of credit, PLA credit accepted by program, and then add some categories of exams. So can you raise my hand?
We don't have a hand raised.
We don't have a hand raised.
Moderators don't get a vote.
Look, we're all in agreement. It's unanimous.
All right.
All right.
All right.
I don't think Brooke's hand was not.
Well, she's not a voting member.
No, Brooke doesn't get a vote, but she could raise her hand.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go on to the next one. The number of Hughes students who applied for PLA credit from October 12th to October 13th. So tracking these different numbers, students and veterans, and then students who received and veterans who received PLA credit. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Actually, I'm wondering if we want to start this a little earlier, like August 2012, now that I'm thinking about it.
This is Lynette. That was my similar thought. If we're tracking students in the institution in general, 2012, 2013, that's going to be an academic calendar. And if one of the things we want to do is not only see how we increase, but also how our students match up against institutional in general, we might want to match up the time frames.
Okay.
So instead of October to October, just, move it a month. I know we weren't here September 2012, but if that, for data purposes, that seems, that's the way the colleges are going to track it anyways, academic year. So.
Oh, Cindy, too. Can we stop just one moment? I'm
Yeah.
sorry. We've got two people, Cindy and Maria, who haven't been able to dial in.
Oh.
Are they calling the right number? It's working. Yeah. What's 4 people though?
It's the 559 number.
I can respond to both of them.
Oh, okay.
Real quick if you
Yes,
want.
go ahead.
Okay, and the number is on the agenda.
Okay, 546-1100. That 559.
Yeah.
Okay.
I called the 100.
Oh, you did?
I called the 1-800 number it gave me, and I just set it the way that I was. And everybody else must have done the same.
Well, let's,
I think there's 2 numbers.
Rachel, I see that Rachel, what number did you call to dial in? Would you tell us really quickly?
877-668-4493.
Okay. So that's the problem.
Same access code?
Better send them the 877 number.
Yes, it would be this access code down here, the 625.
So Matt, you're sending them the 877 number?
Yeah.
Great.
It just gives you the number when you set up your work.
Right, right. Okay, so we'll have Cindy and Maria joining us very shortly. Okay. So we've decided that we should change the dates. I heard September and I heard August. What are the thoughts on that? If when a student applies to take the test, is it?
And NOVA's might be a bit different because I know they start in August.
Well, I think instead of just listing months, if you just list academic quarters, fall, winter, spring,
Right.
summer.
I was going to say, as long as it falls within that time period, does it really matter what month it is?
Yeah, I agree.
Probably not.
Okay, so maybe change it to fall 2012 through summer 2013?
Yes, excellent.
Yeah.
We would want to capture people entering that following year as well.
Yeah, like August, September.
Okay, so through fall of 2013?
That's a 5-quarter thing.
Fall of 2014.
So this is 2012 to 2013 is just a particular measurement here. Just to make sure we capture anybody we happen to get.
The baseline.
From,
never mind. Yep.
Okay. So do we want a 4-quarter, fall through summer?
That sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Fall through summer 2012 through 2013.
And that can be up to, I would assume, up to and including what we're doing for getting people ready for fall quarter. If they earn PLA credit prior to, we should count it?
It happens during the summer months. So.
Yeah, okay.
Sure.
So like if people trying to get into your programs for fall quarter now, like every of ours trying to get, if they're getting some PLA credit, let's count it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any other discussion on that? Any other things that people are kind of seeing as maybe issues? Hi, who just joined us?
Cindy.
Hi, Cindy.
Hi.
I messed up the phone call again, but
What's
we're
that?
so glad you're
okay,
here.
yeah.
No, it's
yeah,
me.
and I've been, yes, okay, no problem. Okay.
So we're glad you're here. Yeah, so does anybody have any other thoughts on this third bullet point under the PLA baseline criteria? All right, so let's do our raised hands if we accept. So it would be the third, fourth, fifth, and sixth bullet points, and we're just going to change that to fall 2012 through summer of 2013, and the understanding that that will also include any fall 2013 enrollees.
They've received credit up to the beginning of fall date.
Right.
Yeah, end of August.
End of August.
We'll have to ask Cindy
So-
where she goes.
September.
Did you say still
Yeah.
Cindy in?
She's strictly a call-in user, so she doesn't
Right.
have a vote button.
Oh.
All right.
Looks like it's unanimous.
So Cindy, one of the things that we were just talking about is on the PLA credit, counting the number of students and veterans who apply for and receive PLA credit. And rather than trying to decide what month to include, we decided to go with a quarter, fall through summer. And that's the only changes that we talked about with these 4 bullet points. So
Yeah,
does that
makes
sound?
sense. Yeah,
that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And Rob, Do you have any comments on that? Are you in agreement with that as well? Yes, there's that hand.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So we'll move on to the next one, which is the number of students who are awarded PLA credit in 2012-2013 at your institution. So this is an institution-wide number and number of veterans. If that's
good.
And this is if you can get this data. It'd just be interesting data to have.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see which of our institutions are actually tracking both of these measures.
Okay, so you're saying it doesn't matter, not necessarily students who are affected by the grant program, but
right. Just
the entire NOVA student population, you want to know anybody who's been awarded PLA credit?
If it's possible to get that, yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure I'm sure.
Yep.
Then we'd see how we stack up
Okay.
in terms of our grant effort.
Do we want to change the time instead of, do we want to include quarters like we did above?
Yeah, I like that idea.
Okay.
Fall 12 through end of summer 13.
All right, let's do a show of hands then, if we are in agreement to track this and add the fall and summer. Yep, we're raising our hands here.
Yes, Cindy.
Oh, good.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay. All right, so now we can move on to PLA Outreach. So, tracking. PLA materials created and distributed to advising, admissions, and registration staff at your institution. So just a yes, no count and the date the distribution was initiated.
Sounds good to me.
Looks good.
Looks good to Lynette.
She's want to vote?
All right, Rachel wants to just vote. Let's do it.
Rachel, I like your style.
And I'm voting yes.
Rob, you in?
Yes.
And Cindy?
Pierre said yes.
She
Well,
did.
I'm just thinking about the
okay.
comment there. So you're just talking the PLA materials. Is that in general or specific to the grant?
Well, one of the things we've been talking about is creating some sort of materials. They're grant focused, but they could be more generally used. But something to let people know who are coming into your program or the school that they may qualify for PLA. So it's how those materials are distributed is one thing. So if you're just giving them to the people who are coming into your program, that would still be a yes, thumbs up. I think the idea is to make sure that as many people know about this as possible.
Okay, well then yes.
Okay. And then the last one under PLA Outreach is met with registrar to clarify or modify PLA rules and regulations. Just a yes, no count, the date and the outcome of the meeting.
Is that similar to the one up above? Or you just want specific to Hughes students?
Well, this would be more for, the registrar is often, and it could, maybe not the registrar at particular schools, but the registrar is often the keeper of the PLA, the person who helps determine, who knows all the rules around whether this CLEP test or that test is the one is accepted. So really this would be about someone on your campus speaking to them and saying, you know, can we accept Dante's test? Can we accept this CLEP test to meet this prerequisite for our particular HEW grant? So that'd be specific conversations about the grant materials and whether these are acceptable.
This is Lynette. I think everyone should do this last one, but I don't know how it's a data point for tracking purposes. It's a good checklist, but it's not. What is it evaluating, I guess? That we did it?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, certainly the outcome's hard to measure there, isn't it? I mean, you can measure that they had a conversation, but...
And that quality control measures aren't necessarily quantifiable over time. They are simple yes-nos, for instance. So I think this might be a good part of our conversation. Not everything has to be spreadsheet available. Part of it will be to have lively conversations. Once we get this part down, then we actually get to talk about this stuff. And I think that making sure that everyone has had that experience is going to be valuable to that conversation. What do you guys think?
That sounds good. And then if, like on my campus, I'm helping to modify these ourselves. So I would be tracking the dates that we met and maybe what our policy used to look like versus what it looks like now to maintain that for, okay.
And and that would provide good evidence of improvement as a result of grant efforts.
Right.
And we might want to add to this meeting with departments that our grant programs are under, to talk to them about accepting other tests and other PLA credits, because often stuff is these kind of things are at a department level.
And not faculty, but rather deans and program chairs. That's what you, yeah.
So what does everybody think about that, adding the program-specific information?
And would that read, met with department chair to clarify and modify PLA rules and regulations, or what are you asking of us?
I think it would be slightly different, but similar, to clarify and modify PLA credits that are accepted by that department. And of course, the hope is that a lot of these departments probably haven't looked at this in 10 years, and maybe they're not even aware that there's a CLEP test or an industry cert that aligns with a prereq, for example. So that would be the spirit of it.
And it may not be a chair, so it could be some term like stakeholder we could use, or whatever I don't know what the right person is on each campus in each department, but whatever that person is who can make that decision.
And we can wordsmith and send it your way for a final review.
Yeah, I think if you're meeting with the registrar or someone within a department, clarifying is one thing, modifying is another. You might want I don't know if anybody would agree that you might want to separate that out. I don't know that every college would allow us to modify PLA rules as they stand on our campus. At least from my end, I know I could work with Beth Tyne in our PLA area, but I don't think I'd be modifying them.
Yeah, I think it would be a great, Cindy, this is Tricia, I think it would be a great outcome if we could document the challenges that you run into, exactly where you put your finger, a modification. Because if we're pushing this intelligence out nationally, we could say, expect these things, and here are some strategies to try. So I think it's really important that if you run into that situation, and I agree with you, same thing here. If we talk about it, that's one thing, but to put the modification process in is another. But documenting all of the above, I think, is what part of our work is about.
Okay. So for clarification purposes, one side of it we're clarifying, the other side we're modifying. And we want to document both.
And I guess modifying is probably too strong a word. Encouraging modifications, kind of pushing the colleges a little bit to re-examine their PLA Pop policies, which are often out of date.
Update, would that be better? Or clarify and update?
Clarify and recommend?
Update and recommend?
That's good. There we go.
Well, it seems like there's two processes here. You want to communicate to them that these, we want to encourage, all that stuff, and then what the outcome of that is, whether something actually changed or not. So those seem like two things.
Yeah.
Because I was hearing what you're saying, and really you can't guarantee any outcome change, but you can carry the conversation forward and see where that goes from there.
And most importantly to the project, you can document those challenges so that other colleges across the country can be thinking about it, and that we can, that serves as a baseline for larger discussions.
Right.
Yeah.
And for example, let's say you took the conversation and said, we think this CLEP test should be accepted, and if the answer was yes and it was changed, you can update with that. If the answer was no, you can update with that. Both are valid things to track.
So do we have wording that we think would go forward with this? Met with registrar to clarify and recommend PLA rules and regulations.
Yeah, or recommend changes to.
Recommend changes to.
Yeah. I think this is Cindy, I could live with that more so than to modify, because I don't.
Yeah.
It just concerns me a little bit, that's all.
Yep.
Yeah, your point is well taken, because we don't have the power to modify.
No.
And then you could, we could still document whether modification happened.
Yeah, that sounds good. Lynette, you can modify, but I can't.
So other thoughts on this? Rob, what do you think? Well, he's
called away.
Yeah, he might have been called away. Rachel? I think you came up with the, oh, there you go. Look at that little hand.
Rachel's quick on the trigger with the hand.
I like that phrasing a lot better. I think it's, like Andy said, it's kind of more straightforward, and then we can also talk about the changes if we were able to modify them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I think that's it for PLA. It looks like I've got just a few changes that I'll make and then distribute that with the meeting notes. And I think we can move on to the retention baseline criteria. All right, so for the retention baseline criteria, these are some of the things that we... Oh.
Thanks for letting us know, Rob.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rob.
All right. So, yeah, so under the retention baseline criteria, this shows the changes that we made last time, and then it also includes some changes recommended by a couple of the student navigators. And so the first 4 bullets, the number of students, completion rates, and the completion rate bullets, those all seem to be fine with everybody. And so I'll just read through them just to remind everybody what we talked about last time. So our baseline criteria were the number of students retained at specified intervals compared with the number enrolled after the drop add period. And then looking at completion rates for different demographic profiles, such as females, veterans, elder students. Then looking at completion rates of students in your program compared with rates for similar programs at the institution, or the institution's overall completion rates. And then completion rates of students in this program compared with historical completion rates in the program. So those all seem to be just fine. Then we want to move on to the services provided and impact on retention, and that's where we got some comments and some feedback. So the first one, was there a goal-setting, advising meeting with the student within the first 4 weeks of program start? That was fine. Did they attend an orientation? That, you know, it's not crossed out up there, but actually that was suggested to maybe not include.
In our last meeting or by
I think in our last meeting.
Oh, yeah. I remember that.
And I think the thinking was we maybe wouldn't know if they attended an orientation. Was that?
Was our thinking that a lot of new students attend an orientation regardless of what program they're in, so we wouldn't know? Is that sounding familiar or not really? We wouldn't know which orientation.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Kind of what I was thinking.
I mean, for our farm tech and nursing programs, there's a mandatory orientation. But is that the type of orientation we're talking about?
Yeah, that's.
But I don't know if I necessarily like that question, or if I feel like we need to track that.
I think the original thinking was, is there any correlation between a student attending orientation and retention of that student in a program?
Right. Okay.
I don't know. I do remember that it was voted down last meeting, but I can't recall why. Should we?
So let's bring up discussion. Is there anybody who's in favor of keeping that? Let's just do a quick show of hands or a yes if you're in favor of keeping it. Going once? Okay. We're going to it'll be out, and we'll remove it, and we'll just move on to the next one. So the next thing that we had was what was the frequency of meetings with the student. It was suggested that maybe we do outreach instead of meetings because it could include emails, phone calls, things that are more than just a meeting. So what does everybody think of that?
I like outreach better than meeting, because I know that we're frequently reaching out to our students.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I like it better too.
How about you, Lynette?
Oh, I unmuted on the thing, but my actual headset was muted when I said instead of outreach, we should use contact points, and then Rachel said, I love outreach. Oops. I think people use the term outreach too much for outreach, like you're trying to recruit someone, so it might confuse if people are coming in and out, but maybe contacts or attempts at contact. I don't know if you want to.
Contact point?
Yeah, contact points or.
That's a good one.
Because then that would include email, phone, face-to-face, and that kind of a thing.
Brooke just chatted in a suggestion in the box. In the chat box. Yeah, you sure? No.
I agree with Lynette's view of outreach. My first thought was doing outreach to bring students into the program, not to retain them. So I think contact points are good.
Okay, should we vote on the contact points? And for those of you who don't have computer access right now, Brooke said maybe include a place where they can identify the type of outreach, phone, email, etc. That way you could correlate the most effective type of outreach for retention. Or is that getting too granular to measure? I think it might be.
I think it is, yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
So we're thinking about what was the frequency of contact points with the student?
Yep. Should we have hand raises?
Let's do it.
I wonder if that phrase works when you're saying what was the frequency of contact points. Those, I mean, that,
well, can't you just say what was the frequency of contact?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Points are
yeah.
Verbal. I mean, incorrect.
Well, the one thing I'm thinking of is if I am trying to follow up with a student, I send them an email, they don't get back to me. So I try to call them, they don't get back to me. I tried twice, I did not reach them either time, so I didn't reach contact. So how would you describe that?
Well, I'm confused because isn't this part, I mean, won't the student navigator be tracking that type of stuff on a totally different database? And this is just for the continuous improvement cabinet? Or is this, I just feel like we're doing the same thing in a couple of different places, and at how detailed do we need to get in this particular area?
I think you raised a good point about a larger issue, Tony, and that is tracking mechanisms for all of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And whether,
I mean, there's so many already.
I envision with some parts of it that we'll just be extracting information from student database.
Right, and now, I mean, I haven't looked at in great detail at that, but I do know that Beth personally is already she keeps a very detailed log of how she speaks with each one of her students, so that's information that will be readily available, and I'm assuming most navigators would just for that reason. Some are easier by email, some prefer to be called by phone, some you're never going to get a hold of. So I'm just trying to keep it a little bit simpler so we're not pulling our hair out.
So are you thinking that we track every outreach, every contact attempt to students, or something else?
Not attempt, I don't think, but point.
Well, and that's Andy's question, though. If he sends an email, phone, emails again, and doesn't get any response, does that count towards this measurement or not?
Right.
Yeah, I would say it wouldn't.
Would be no. Outreach would be yes.
Right.
But contact point. So attempting that contact point would be no.
Contact point would be no.
Yeah. So I think.
Should we use what is the frequency of communication?
I love it.
If you define communication as one way, however, I mean, you arrive at the same question. Is communication defined as two-way, query and response, or is it just query?
Brooke has a point, too.
What are you really trying to determine here? What are you really after in this piece?
Is it that more contact, does the amount of contact equal a difference in success?
Mm-hmm.
In that case, it would be consummated contact. Right?
Brooke's chatting in the box.
That's the term. I want that term in there. What was the frequency of consummated contact to the student? That's what I'm voting for.
Yeah.
A few hands up on that one. Yeah.
Successful contact?
Brooke is chatting in the box again. Focus on outreach impact on retention, not attempt.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We go. Yeah, so that's why successful is, I think, a good addition. No?
But I think Cindy's point of what is the point is, or what is the exact thing we're trying to. Hi, this is Lynette. Can you hear me now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I've been talking to myself. What I was going to say, I think Cindy had a good point about what is the whole purpose of the end goal, because I think that if there's a difference between trying to get a hold of someone and them not getting back to you, that's obviously not very useful. But if you're sending out information about financial aid or something like that, the student might not answer you, but it's still helpful information. So I feel like we're getting, for this purpose, a little bit too specific. That makes sense?
Well, but isn't this specific to just PLAs and not, oh, I'm sorry,
no, I
foreign
think it's
retention.
just retention.
Hello, I'm still on page 1. Don't mind me.
So, this is a tough one.
Can't we just say what was the frequency of contact and call it a day?
Yeah, are we going to go back later and define these? Because then we can just move on right now and then.
We're breaking down to attempted and completed, and actually the attempted rate is very significant. So if we could just make it 2 large categories, perhaps, attempted and completed, and it doesn't mean, that there was one kind of outcome or another, but I think if we do see attempted contacts, and that's huge, and success is low, then maybe we have something to talk about, or, vice versa. I think what I feel uneasy about is everything we add to this, we're creating more work for ourselves, right? This isn't like a policy we're going to send out like to Mother Russia or something. We have to actually do these things, so it makes me really, really cautious.
But putting on my student nav hat here, I don't think this would be that hard. If I call a student, I put it in the record, attempted to call a student, left a message. So, that they didn't get back to me isn't hard to track it, and it isn't hard to score it. I can pull that data out of the database.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
So that would be attempted and completed?
Yeah, I mean, that's the attempt, and if they got back to me, that's the completed.
You want to know that as a navigator anyhow.
Sure.
I mean, you have a general sense of it, but you want to be able to look at it over time.
Right.
Yeah.
So what does everybody think about breaking that up into attempted
And consummated.
and consummated? And then I think either contact or communication is fine with me. What do you all think?
So are
preference.
sorry. So just to be clear about this question, are we counting the contact with all of the students or just the ones who did not complete the program?
Oh, all students. So
Okay.
it would be, so what we're looking for, and Rob, this gets at your question. Rob asked, but what was the impact on retention? And I think that's what we're trying to demonstrate by collecting this information, is that hopefully some patterns will emerge. You know, we're hoping that the hypothesis is that frequent student communication leads to higher retention rates. But we won't know that until we collect this information and analyze it.
And the DOL has invested in that. And so what they want to know is, should we invest in that again, or should we modify? Should we look for modifications of that? So that's valuable information for our funder.
I'm just thinking of the logistics of this thing. I know it sounds easy to have a navigator go in and document it, and of course if they're meeting with it, I'm thinking if you've got 100 students and you're trying to contact them all for one particular reason, to send out some information, and you send that out, and then you have to go into 100 student files. Okay, I'm just thinking logistically here, and there might be an easy answer to this. Then you've got to say that I sent this thing out 100 times over. Is there an easier way?
That's a really good point.
And won't there be different amounts of contact with the students? I mean, so are we breaking this down by each student? I'm trying to think big picture.
Yeah. From my perspective as a student nav, I'm going to document any contact I have with the student and where I'm going, and calls I left and answers back and where we're going, that sort of thing. So I would think yes.
So I know Natalie has case notes, my student navigator here at Whatcom, case notes that she keeps, and she does document the meetings. I'm just wondering, the tick marks, do you need to know exactly what the contact was about, and if she's contacted somebody 3 times in one day trying to reach them, and then she has to go back in and count every single contact, and then what period of time are we looking at too? Because then, if it's a year, then she's got to go back over an entire year's worth. If there's a system in place that to make that easy, I can certainly support it. It's a lot of work.
What we've done in the past is just used a simple Excel spreadsheet with an X in a column. So that way, you can sort on students, and it will give you an automatic count. Per student or by class, or you can imagine. But so if it's a column and an X away, as long as it's done consistently, then you're able to aggregate. Does that sound workable?
What we're tracking it in the Access database, but still it's the same concept.
Yeah, same deal.
That, we have a tool there that is tracking these events called meetings, and if we may have to augment it slightly to say phone message or email, but I can't see why this would be a hard thing to pull out of the data through reporting at all. I think it should be easy.
Well, you're really good at this, Matt, so we'll let you figure out how to make it really easy, okay?
Yeah, well, we'll have
and Natalie's really good, too, so the two of you can put your heads together on that. Just trying to figure out how logistically this might look, and are we adding more work, and is this important information? So that's, in the end, it will all look wonderful.
Yeah, I think it is important to try and count this. Mm-hmm. And I think I've got some ideas on how we might track it. That wouldn't be...
Great. Okay. And particularly since this was called out in the grant as one of the foundations of our student services, strategy, I think we do need to measure it.
And we need it, I mean, when I think about the actual baseline purpose of this group, we want to continually improve. So we'll want to look at it on a regular basis and try and make individual college decisions, but also as a consortium, kind of advise each other. So
maybe quarterly?
Yeah. Because we're going to go from monthly to quarterly meetings on CIC, is that right? Is that what we decided, I think?
We're hoping to.
Yeah, in the new year. Yeah, so that would work out. Yep.
Okay, well, I propose this because we're coming up on 2 o'clock. I will try and get some of our thinking around what has become 2 bullet points and put that in the notes, and we'll just continue this discussion at our next meeting. And that'll give us all a chance to think about it some more, and I can finish incorporating some of the other feedback that we've gotten. What do y'all think of that? Sound good? Raise hands.
Yeah, that works.
I don't think we're ready to really make a decision today on this, and we're kind of out of time for more discussion. Okay, so go ahead and, I guess, raise your hand if you don't agree, if you want to keep discussing it.
By yourself, because we're all doing it.
Okay, I don't see no hands. Okay. The next thing that I want to talk about just very briefly, on the agenda I have something called reviewing and revising guidelines. So what I'm going to try and do is come up with a way for us to work on these baseline criteria between meetings so that we can continue our work as we ask for feedback from various members, like the student navigators, the instructional support people, or curricular people, so that we're not trying to incorporate their words, that they can actually go in and make changes to the baseline criteria without, and still more of a track changes approach. So I've got some ideas on how to do that, and I'll send out those guidelines very shortly. But I just wanted to let you know I've got that kind of in the pipeline.
Esther, this is Patricia. Thank you for continuing to facilitate this. I know that it probably be, you will welcome the opportunity to hand this responsibility off on a rotating basis, in a not very long, right?
Yeah, and people are already just jumping at the bit, right, guys? It's like, please, I want to take over.
This is really exacting and difficult work. Thank you for doing it.
Yeah, and I appreciate everybody's contributions and your participation. It's really great. Okay, so next meeting we're going to continue the retention baseline criteria and hopefully move on to the faculty development criteria. So have a great week, and if there's nothing else, we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.